Well, I appreciate, am I on? I appreciate y'all helping me with that. I hadn't sung that in so long, I forgot how it went. Amen, Brother Louise. It wasn't your fault that you was playing the introduction completely different. It's not your fault. Amen. Appreciate the opportunity to be back tonight. Had a good time this morning. Hope you had a good time. Hope God spoke to your hearts. Good to see Brother Brock, Sister Brock here. Good to see some old friends from over Light of Calvary. Long time since I've seen some of them. Brother Brock had a major influence in my life as a teenager in my formidable years. I think I was about maybe 16, maybe, when I came to Light of Calvary, and God called me to preach at 21, I think. And my spot was right on that front row, right there, right where you're at. That's where I sat, right on that front row. That was my spot, ain't it? Amen. And Brother Brock preached the hide off me every service, and I love him for it. Amen. It's good to see them here tonight. He's been up and preached for me a few times in Baltimore. You can tell by looking at him, that's a long drive up there and back. Amen. Love y'all. Daniel chapter number 1. Thank you, Brother Ingram, for the opportunity to be back tonight. And as you saw in the video, if there's anything ever been, I've been caught by surprise, it was that. I didn't have no idea. Somebody told me, said, Brother Shiflett said, if you'd have planned it and had millions of dollars, you could not have had a more effective publicity campaign than that. It didn't cost a dime. I mean, it was amazing how that happened. Without a doubt, God takes foolish things of this world to confound the wise. Just one random act of defiance, that thing, I'm telling you, took off. It was funny how it happened, too. Just a little bit of the backstory. I had no idea I was going to do that. I was preaching that night on religion without restriction, where Moses went to Pharaoh and said, let my people go. And Pharaoh kept trying to negotiate with him. You know the story. 4 times Pharaoh kept trying to get Moses to concede to some degree, and Moses wouldn't budge. And the last one was, it was you can go worship in the land. The other one is don't go too far. The third one was you can take your men but leave your women and children here. And then the fourth one was you can take your men and women and children, but you got to leave your flocks here. And Moses looked at Pharaoh and said, there won't be one hoof left behind when we go. Not one hoof. And that's about as dogmatic as you can get looking at Pharaoh. And he didn't budge. And I used that text and I preached that message on religion without restriction, that Pharaoh, the type and picture of the world, the devil, doesn't have the right to tell God's people how to worship their God. And I had that paperwork on the pulpit because I had referred to it in the course of the message and just got in the heat of the moment, I reckon, and tore it up. I didn't plan on doing it. It wasn't scripted. If I'd scripted it, it wouldn't have worked. But it just happened. And the next morning, I was taking Stuart to work. He was driving, and I was sitting on the passenger seat, and I said, I want to say that again. And I pulled it up on our YouTube channel, and I found that spot in that message where I tore it up. And I said, well, that's kind of out of the ordinary. I said, I might want to hang on to that. And I took my iPhone. Some of you didn't know you could do that. I took my iPhone, and I did a screen recording of the YouTube channel and just snipped it down to that 58-second clip and stuck it up on my Twitter account. I didn't put any words up there. I didn't say, y'all ought to watch this. This is funny. Hope this is a blessing. I didn't say anything. I just put the clip up there. And literally an hour and 27 minutes later, I had Fox News reaching out. You were talking about shocked. I was shocked. Never been more shocked. And so God just took that thing, and I'm still getting phone calls and emails and letters in the mail from people that saw that 3-minute segment on Fox News. I'm still getting letters today. I don't know how many people have written, thousands. We've had thousands of dollars come in to the church. People said, I want to just send some money. Did I send you that email yesterday from Australia? A man from Australia said, I tried to send you some money and my internet won't work or whatever, and because I guess it's from a different country. He said, I just want to know, I appreciate you taking a stand. And I have been blown away, been humbled at the response to that. And it's interesting that happened because that's kind of what I'm dealing with tonight. But I've preached this message a couple other times. Brother Brock's sitting here. He knows me. He's known me since I was a teenager. This is what I'm preaching tonight is my testimony. It really is. And I hope that it'll help you and challenge you from Daniel chapter number 1. And just, if nothing else, the video you just saw is proof that if you'll just take a stand, God can do something. Now, I got criticized. Anytime you do anything for God, you get criticized. I mean, I had some big-name preachers criticizing me. I mean, some of them putting some stuff on social media within just a few hours of that hitting Fox News. I was accused of being carnal and displaying and grandstanding and theatrics and everything else. God's my witness. I wasn't grandstanding and it wasn't theatrics. I was protesting the government telling us we couldn't go to church. And we had already not gone to church for 2 months. I mean, we closed our church. You know, that's the hardest thing I've ever done is tell my people, begging me if they can come to church. No, you can't come, and only have 10 people there. And I got a place where I got tired of doing it. And then the governor opened up our state. We'd been petitioning, sending letters, and I was on the governor's commission work group to implement safety protocols to get churches reopened, and I was on that for a week, and that thing turned into a dumpster fire. And so I resigned from it. I told them, I said, y'all are way out of bounds on this. I don't want my name on it. I don't want to be a part of it. I mean, it was crazy stuff. They said you can't sing in the church. You couldn't sing even with face mask on. You had to collect your offerings in plastic bags, and you couldn't touch it and count it for 48 hours. I'm thinking, well, they're not doing that at Dunkin'. And I did say Dunkin'. I didn't stutter. Dunkin' Donuts. That's where I go. But they're taking cash and fixing everybody's cups, putting lids on it, and then they're telling us we can't count the offering. I mean, it wasn't about the offering. It was just the principle of thing. The double standard was what I had a problem with. They said you can't open your children's ministries. You can't reopen any children's ministries without guidance from the Department of Education. I said, you're out of your mind. Department of Education has no jurisdiction over our church, over our children's ministries. And I told them, and there was a whole list of things that they were saying we were going to have to do. And I said, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing it. And so I resigned from that commission, and we went ahead and just started praying about starting church back. And we were going to start back on the 24th. That was Memorial Day weekend. I'd already sent a letter out to the church, said we're going to open on the 24th, with or without the governor's permission. And then on like the 13th, the governor opened up the state and opened up churches to 50% capacity. I wasn't real excited about 50% capacity, but that was better than 10 people. I said, we'll just make that work. I said, we'll figure it out. And so I got up in the church that Wednesday night. He announced it. The governor had that press conference on a Wednesday afternoon at 5 o'clock and opened up the state. It's like, praise the Lord. Because we was putting so much pressure on him, these letters, and I had pastors in my church for meetings, and we were sending letters, and I mean, we were pushing hard. So I got up in church and I said, we're not going to wait till the 24th. We're going to have church this Sunday, the 17th. We'll see you Sunday morning. Well, little did we know the next day on that Thursday, the county executive shut the churches back down again. I said, I ain't doing this again. I'm not going through this whole protesting and writing letters and petitioning and phone calls. We're just going to go ahead and have church. And I got an email from the health department on Saturday night at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock on Saturday night. I would never check my email that late at night on Saturday, but we had company. And I checked my email, and they said, we implore you not to have church tomorrow. Well, we went ahead and had church on the 17th. And, man, I walked out of the back door, Brother Ingram, and I saw 125 of my people there for that service. And they came thinking they could be fined. They came thinking that they could have been fined for coming to church. Man, I'm telling you what. I started crying. It got on around there. And then I got on that next day, that Monday, I got another email. It was that cease and desist, cease and desist. Finally, we can fine you $5,000. And I said, no, you didn't go too far now. And we went ahead and church that Wednesday night, and that's the night that I preached that message. And we're still in court. We're still in court. They only fined us $500. I guess they thought if they just only fined us $500 that we'd just pay it. And that'd be the end of it, but they don't know me very well. I wouldn't pay it if it was only 50 cents. There's a principle at stake here. And I told them, I said, I ain't paying it. I don't care what you do, I ain't paying it. You can put me in jail. I look good in orange. And so we didn't even tell anybody we'd been fined for a whole week because I was trying to give them the opportunity to withdraw the fine without publicity. And we told them, said, look, we won't even let anybody know you did this. But I'm telling you right now, if you don't take this fine away, we're going to kick and scream like you ain't never seen before. And they said, no, we're not going to take it away. And so one thing led to another, and we had our hearing. This coming Tuesday will be 4 weeks ago we had our hearing. And that judge still has not ruled on this case. And he don't want to. They got the tiger by the tail. They don't know what to do. Because if he drops it, then he's going to look bad. And if he tells us we got to pay it, well, it's going to get on, put it that way. So, because I believe they're going to try to shut our churches down again. And it don't have to be over a virus. It can just be over hate speech. The climate of this country right now is if they say this is hate speech and you can't preach it, well, what you going to do? If you went along with everything else up to this point, what you going to do then? At some point, you got to decide where you stand. So pray for us. Either way, it's going to get interesting around our place here pretty soon. Are you in Daniel? Some of y'all, I'll give you a few minutes to find that. Daniel, would you stand with me, please? You've been sitting for a little bit. Stand with me, please. Daniel chapter number 1. In the first, verse number 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, into Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God, small g God. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel and of the king's seed and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom and cunning and knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and when they and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names. For he gave unto Daniel the name Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Then let our countenances be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, as thou seest, deal with thy servants. And so he consented to them in this manner, and proved them 10 days. At the end of 10 days, their countenance appeared fatter and fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine which they should drink, and gave them pulse. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill and all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now at the end of the days that the king had said he would bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar, and the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. And Daniel continued even unto the 1st year of King Cyrus. Lord, help us now, I pray, as we preach your word. Give us power and liberty, and may God's people be challenged and stirred, I pray, in Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for standing. You can be seated. I want to preach for a few minutes on this thought out of verse number 10. Now, this is a very familiar passage of Scripture. If you've been in church any length of time, you know this story. You're familiar with this story. I read the whole chapter because I wanted it to be make sense and God to bring it all together in our hearts and in our minds. But there's a statement in verse number 10, and I noticed one day that jumped off the page at me, the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink, for why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Now, here's what he was saying. Here's what this prince of the eunuchs was saying to Daniel. I don't know why you have to be different from all the people in your own group. He didn't say to him that I don't know why you want to be different from us. That would have been pretty simple to understand. He didn't say to Daniel, I don't understand why you want to be different than the world or those of us that are in this country that brought you here. He said, why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Why is it you've got to be different from your own people? Well, that really jumped off the page at me. I want to preach on that thought for just a few minutes tonight. A stick in the mud. A stick in the mud. Some of you may not know what that means, but if you ever made mud pies, you know what it means. Pottery used to collect the clay and there'd be a stick in there to pull it out, and make a long story short, it just doesn't go there. And that saying, I grew up with it as somebody's always trying to be different. Somebody's always a square peg in a round hole might be another statement that you can understand. But Daniel in this passage of Scripture was without a doubt being a stick in the mud. And the eunuch didn't understand that. Now, I want to, if I can, by way of introduction tonight, I want to point out some of the things that he had in common with these guys. They were all brought into captivity together at the beginning of the chapter. Notice this, they all had the same problems. They all had the same problems. They had been taken out of their homeland, and they had been forced into captivity under the kingdom there. And so they all had the same heartaches, the same difficulties. Their homeland had been besieged, had been kidnapped, they'd been carried away. They all had that in common. Same problems. They could all identify together on that. Not only did they have the same problems, but they had the same pedigree. According to verse number 3, the king spake unto Ashpenaz, master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel and of the king's seed and of the princes. So they had that in common. They were all basically here, according to what I understand, is they were royalty. They were of the elite. They were of the prestigious higher echelons of Israel. Those young men that had been taken captive, they all had the same pedigree. They had that in common. Same problems, same pedigree. According to verse number 4, they all had the same potential. Look at what it says. Children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge and understanding science, such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace. They were absolutely exceptional in every area. The Bible tells us that they didn't even have blemishes. I mean, no zits, no pimples. They didn't have any physical blemishes to mention of or speak of. The Bible says they were well favored, meaning they were gifted, they were talented, they were smart, skillful in all wisdom and cunning in knowledge and understanding science. I mean, they were exceptional. Science never was my best subject. I learned this. I learned H2O is a glass of water and H1O is a half a glass of water. I learned that. It's about the extent of my science knowledge. But these young men were exceptional, and they had the same potential. They also had the same provisions. Look at verse number 5. The king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank. They had all this in common. And Daniel is identifying with the children of his sort just fine through all of this. Till you get to verse number 8. But Daniel. Now, we don't know how many young men, we don't know how many children, we don't know how many of these certain of the children of Israel and the king's seed and the princes, we don't know how many of them were brought in and held captive, but we do know this, out of all of them, Daniel was different. He was different from even his own sort. He didn't fit in with even his own crowd. I'm going somewhere, you got to get this. Even in his own circles, he didn't fit in. You know, it's amazing to me how many independent Baptists, they are content to just not identify with the world. Stay with me now. They're content to just not be identified with the unbelievers. But it's never crossed their mind that there might be a few of their own sort they ought not to be identified with. If Daniel had been the typical independent Baptist because he was the only one that felt this way, he would have never said or did anything about it. He would have just went along to get along. But the Bible says Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself for the portion of the king's meat. So they all had the same problems, they had the same pedigree, they had the same potential, and they had the same provision, but they did not have the same principles. Daniel had a set of principles that apparently was extremely unique, extremely rare, because none of the other children of his sort had a problem apparently with eating the king's meat and drinking the king's wine, even though they knew they were not supposed to. And trust me, they knew they were not supposed to. What the prince of the eunuch didn't understand was why Daniel wasn't willing to go along with his own group. That's what he didn't understand. He said, I don't understand why you're being so difficult. Why can't you just go along with your own sort? And Daniel just said, well, maybe I've got different principles. Maybe I'm purposing in my heart that I do not want to be defiled with the same thing they're being defiled with. And having those principles automatically set him aside from his own sort. I guess what I'm saying tonight is this. I'm not preaching this message at Canaan Baptist Church in Covington, Georgia to try and challenge you to live above the world, the unbelievers, the pagans, the heathens you work with, the people that are on in your neighborhood, the people that you see on television, the people that are portrayed in Hollywood. I'm not trying to get you to live above them. That's pretty much a given. What I'm seeing that bothers me is that it seems like many Christians are just content to fit in with each other and allow everybody else to dictate their principles. Young people are not the worst. They just get picked on more for it. Young people see their parents doing the same thing. Nobody wants to be a stick in the mud. When everybody else is saying it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, they don't want to be the one to say, no, that's not okay. They don't want to be the one to jeopardize the wrath and fury of people coming down on them for being different. Why don't you just do what everybody else is doing? Why don't you just wear what everybody else is wearing? Why don't you just listen to what everybody else is listening to? Why don't you watch what everybody else is watching? Nobody else has a problem with that. Why do you have a problem with that? Why are you being such a stick in the mud? I've heard it my whole life. And I've been a stick in the mud my whole life. Brother Brock sitting right here as a teenager, when it's never easy, by the way. You young people, it's easy for you to say. You're a pastor. It's harder now than it was when I was a teenager. Because I've got important people now hating me. When I was a teenager, I didn't. I just had other teenagers. Is that making sense? When you're a teenager, it's just that other kid in the church or the youth group or your school that laughs at you and snickers at you and makes you feel awkward. When you get our age, it's people with a national platform that are putting the heat on you. It don't get easier. But I'm shocked at how many people in our churches are willing to just do what everybody else is doing, even though they know it's wrong. And I've drilled this into my children, and I've drilled this into our youth group at our church, and I've tried my best. I've failed miserably with some of them, but I've told them, I said, my definition of leadership is doing the right thing even if you have to do it all by yourself. And many of the people in the Bible that we look to as heroes of the faith, they did it by themselves. Nobody else with them. They didn't have a fan club. They didn't have groupies. They didn't have a little support group to help them. It was just them. But they did what they were supposed to do, and they had principles. And they were a stick in the mud. Didn't set out to be a stick in the mud, just became a stick in the mud. Even when I was at Light of Calvary all those years, there was two sets of young people. There was a group of us young men that wanted to serve God and had a passion for God. And man, we sit on the front row and had our Bibles out and had our pen in our hand and listened to the preacher. And we were singing in the choir and we were involved in soul winning and outreach. And if they was having work day, we was there. And then we had some young people that sat in the back, didn't bring their Bible. We're all sitting on the front row with our suits and ties on. They're sitting on the back row with their shirt tails out, all sprawled out. They ain't paying attention, talking, laughing, cutting up during church. And it never entered my mind. It never was part of my consciousness to separate myself from those young people. It was just a normal thing. It just happened. There was young teenagers in our church that I didn't even know. We never interacted. I sat there and they sat back there. Was I trying to be different? No, but I was different. I wasn't trying to be different. I had a different set of goals and ambitions and desires as a young person, and that alone separated me from other young people in our church. And we were cordial, spoke to them, hey, how you doing? But I mean, that was it. I didn't go to their house. They didn't come over to our house. When I was over at your house, they was never over there. And I was at your house a lot, hanging out at the preacher's house, jumping on trampoline, riding dirt bikes up trees. Remember that? Oh yeah, I got on was it a 250? Oh yeah, this thing's got a power band. I don't know what that means. I just knew when the preacher preached about you want the power of God, I thought the motorcycle had power. I said on that thing's got a power band. Man, I popped the clutch on that thing and climbed a tree on that dirt bike. I mean, went up the tree, fell down, I fell back on the ground and said, what'd your preacher do? He was laughing at me. We'd pull the trampoline over to the house and climb up on the house and jump off the house. Oh, we did that all the time. But some of the other young people in our church, they didn't go over there. And we'd all jump in a vehicle and go to a youth conference or a camp meeting or a revival meeting or a tent meeting, and none of them want to go. We'd have special services, and none of them want to come. I wasn't trying to be a stick in the mud. I just was a stick in the mud. And now here I am, 47, be 48 in October, and I'm still a stick in the mud. I told my church up there, for somebody that tries so hard to keep their head down, I fail miserably at that. Trying to mind my own business, don't get involved in other people's business, my wife will tell you. And I turn around and I find myself up to here in trouble. What'd I do? I didn't do anything. I just had principles. Different from other people's principles. And what I love about Daniel in this story right here is that he had such a good spirit. Wow, he was a stick in the mud. In fact, the Bible tells us that he had an excellent spirit. That's one of the things we know about Daniel, was that he had an excellent spirit. But I'm going to show you three things this evening, quickly. Three things that'll make you be a stick in the mud. Three characteristics of what will happen. Number one, a stick in the mud will be more vocal than other people. We see in verse number 1 through verse number 7, nobody said anything. You get to verse number 8, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore, because he had this principle, because he had this desire, because he purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself, he had to say something. He couldn't help it. He requested of the prince of the eunuchs, that he might not defile himself. I don't know how many other young men were in that crowd, but he was the only one that said anything. He's the only one that spoke up. He's the only one when they said, all right, this is what you got to eat. And I don't know what it was, but it was wrong. For them, it was wrong. It could have been ribs. It could have been pork loin. It could have been pork loin wrapped up in bacon. I don't know. It could have been sausage and eggs. I don't know what it was. But it was something that they were strictly forbidden to eat. And so they walked in there and they gathered all these young men up and they said, all right, this is what you got to eat. This is what you got to drink. Does anybody have any questions? Nobody said anything. Daniel said, I got a question. Is there another way we can do this? Because I don't really want to do this. He requested. Do you see the respect? Do you see the graciousness? But do you see the guts that it took for him to speak up? Everybody else decided to just go along with it. They decided not to rock the boat. How many times have you heard that? Just don't rock the boat. It's amazing to me. I've been a Baptist my whole life. If anybody can preach about Baptists, it's me. I'm a 5th generation independent Baptist preacher. Can you believe that? And this crowd, this anti-IFB crowd, getting on my nerves. All you IFB, don't say all you IFB. We're independent of each other. You can't lump us all into one bowl. I don't care how hard you try. You IFB, don't come at me with that. But I'm going to be honest with you right now. One thing I know about Baptists, many times, the only time they want to say something is at the wrong time about the wrong thing. They don't want to speak up about something that really counts. In the middle of a business meeting, no, that's no problem. Preacher, I'm against it. Okay, I hear you, buddy. You're against it. That's the first time you've spoke up in 5 years is a vote of dissent. Stay with me now. Come on. Don't die on me. I'm not talking about that kind of speaking up. I'm talking about speaking up about sin. I'm talking about having principles when it comes to things that matter of biblical proportions. Stick in the mud will say something when nobody else will. Stick in the mud cannot remain silent when things are happening. That is wrong. Stick in the mud will not go along with blatant sin and ungodliness. And I'm amazed at how many people won't say a word when something needs to be said. My first gig in the ministry was a youth pastor up in Cumming, Georgia. I tell about it in my book, Wolves Among Lambs. But there was an aspect of that, being a youth pastor, that I was shocked. So my job as a youth pastor was to organize youth activities and order pizza. If you can do that, you can be a youth pastor in most churches. Schedule some games, order pizza, job is safe. At this particular get-together at one of the deacons' house, they wanted to watch a movie. Well, now, you're looking at a guy that grew up in a house that didn't have a TV. Okay, my parents were sticking in the mud too. They threw the TV out of the house in 1976, back when the worst thing on TV was John Wayne's 4-letter words. Oh, I just hit some of y'all, didn't I, on that John Wayne? I grew up without a TV. And so we're at these people's house. I'm a youth pastor. I'm single. I ain't even married yet. They want to watch a movie. Well, I hadn't seen the movie, which wasn't unusual. I hadn't seen hardly none of them. We're going to watch this movie. Okay. They said, it's a good movie. Okay. I'm down. They put the movie in. We start eating pizza. 5 minutes into it, they're cussing in the movie. God's name in vain in the movie. And at first I thought I didn't hear it right because nobody flinched in the whole room. I mean, they didn't flinch. And I thought to myself, I think he just cussed. Now here I am with a room full of teenagers, Christian Baptist church youth get together. And they're watching a movie at the deacon's house and they're cussing in the movie. Now I know some of y'all might not have a problem with that, but that blew my mind. And I thought to myself, there ain't no way that that's what they just said, or they wouldn't be playing this. But sure enough, just a few minutes later, they cussed again. And I got a knot in my stomach big as a bowling ball. Because I got the deacon and his wife, and it's their house. And I got the whole youth group and a couple other adults that are there, chaperoning whatever in the Sam Hill that means, because they wasn't doing it. And I'm sitting there going, I guess I got to be the one to throw a flag. And I hadn't been a youth pastor but just a few weeks. I didn't know the rules. I didn't even have a youth pastor growing up. I didn't even know what a youth pastor was. But I knew a youth pastor can't stand up in Sunday school and teach his young people that they shouldn't cuss and watch bad stuff and then have cussing and bad stuff at the youth event. Come on now. And I'm sitting there and I got this knot in my stomach and my mouth got dry and my hands got sweaty. And I said, y'all, we can't watch this. And everybody looked at me like I was crazy. I mean, they all looked at me like I was crazy. They looked at me like, why? I said, they're cussing. Y'all don't hear that? They're cussing and said God's name in vain twice. And they was like, well, I don't think they say it no more. I said, they done cussed 4 times and we're 10 minutes into this movie. I don't think they're going to have the rest of the movie with no cussing in it. I'm no expert, but I ain't stupid. We can't watch this. Oh, okay. And I got that, oh, well, we got old fuddy-duddy over here, stick in the mud, Shiflett, going to speak up about the cussing in the God's name in vain in the movie. I'm like, are you kidding me? Y'all know what I'm talking about, don't you? Was that easy? No, it wasn't easy. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And most of them young people cut me off, turned me off after that. I got up the next Sunday morning, tried to teach Sunday school. They laughed, played, cut up, wouldn't pay attention to me. They thought I was weird because I didn't want them listening to cussing. And that deacon came to me later and chewed me out about it. It got real interesting when the pastor propositioned me in a hotel room one night and I had to shut him down. My whole life has just been one story after the other where I'm looking at somebody going, I can't believe this is happening to me, but I cannot not say something. Somebody's got to say something right here. I'm just shocked at how many people don't say anything. You know why they don't want to say anything? I'm going to stick in the mud. You know why young people don't say anything? When their friends start telling dirty jokes, they don't want to be a stick in the mud. You know why some of you men on the job don't say nothing when your buddy comes up cussing, talking about all of his adulterous affairs and all the junk he's been involved in? You don't want to be a stick in the mud. I know what you're saying. You don't understand, preacher. I got to work with this guy. And? So? When are you going to say something? When are you going to speak up? Think about Caleb in Numbers 13. Caleb stilled the people before Moses. I mean, the whole nation of Israel belly aching, crying and moaning. I can't believe he brought us all the way up here to the edge of this river. And I can't believe this. I can't believe it. And Caleb walked out there in front of everybody and said, shut up! Everybody, just be quiet a minute. I was over there. And I'm telling you, we're well able to go over there. You think that was easy with the 10 other spies standing over here trying to get everybody not to? You think that was easy? It wasn't easy. What about when David showed up in 1 Samuel 17? He's dead. He told him, said, get up and take some bread and cheese and corn to your brethren. They're down there fighting the battle. So he gets up early that morning. He leaves his sheep in the hand of a keeper, and he gets his bread and his cheese and his corn. He goes down to the battle. He gets there. By the time he gets there, Goliath starts running his mouth. Goliath's been doing this morning and night for 40 days. 40 days. That's 80 times. And I was a homeschooler, but I can do math. 80 times he defied God and the armies of God. And nobody said one word. David shows up first time. He hears that. He said, what happens to the guy that goes out there and kills him? That's what he said. And his brother Eliab standing there. We know your pride and the naughtiness of your heart. David said, what have I now done? Is there not a cause? How can y'all stand up here for 40 days and listen to this mess and nobody say anything? We have no record David ever gave the cheese and bread and the corn to his brethren. No. You know what he did? He went down there and took care of business. He heard it one time. One time. They heard it 80 and did nothing. Well, I'll take that back. They did try to talk him out of doing anything. What about Nehemiah? Chapter 1 and 2 of Nehemiah. Stood in front of that king, said, send me that I may build the walls. You think that was easy for him? No, it wasn't easy. He prayed and fasted about it for 6 months. Read chapter 1. And he was so tore up on the inside, he was so upset. The king said, what's the matter with you? I can see it on your face, something's wrong with you. And he was so nervous and he was so scared about having to tell the king. He said, hang on just a minute, I need to go pray for a little bit. Read chapter 2. He had to leave and go pray about it and get his nerve up to go in there just to tell the king what was bothering him. Stick in the mud. You know what I love about Daniel in Daniel chapter number 1? He didn't fuss at everybody else for what they were doing wrong. He just said, I ain't doing it. It's funny though, these days, if you just take a stand and say, this is what I'm going to do, everybody says, I don't know why you're so against us. I didn't say nothing about you. I said, that's not what I'm going to do. I couldn't believe how many people attacked me because we went back to having church. I can't believe you're attacking us. I said, I'm not attacking anybody. You do whatever you want to do. You mind God. Not once did I ever say the coronavirus wasn't real. Not once did I ever call it a hoax. Not once from the pulpit did I ever minimize the coronavirus. Is everybody still with me? Now, out of the pulpit, I got a few thoughts about it. I'll share with you if you want to hear them. But from the pulpit, not once did I ever take that route. I just said, this is what I believe God wants us to do. And I can believe the people that got mad at upset with us. Daniel didn't say, you bunch of compromising devils. The whole youth group, all of y'all is going to hell. He didn't say that. He just said, I don't want to eat this meat and drink this wine. Is there any possible way we could have some kind of plan B? Because I don't really want to do this. Being a stick in the mud, you got to be more vocal. Number 2, if you're sticking in the mud, not only be more vocal, but write this down, you'll be more visible. And this, I think, is really where it starts to get real. In verse number 10, the prince of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink, for why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Look what Daniel said in verse number 13. Then let our countenances be looked upon before thee. You know what he was saying? My principles is causing me to stick my neck out here. And I understand that by doing this, I'm opening myself up to more intense scrutiny. But that's okay. He said, if you want to get the microscope out, get it out. He said, I know that if I eat what these other guys are eating, Brother Ingram, when they pass by the king, he'll just look at them one way. But if he finds out we've been eating something different, he's going to look at us harder and more intently. And he's going to be more critical and more suspicious and try to find something wrong with us than he was doing to everybody else. But you know what Daniel said? That's okay. I can live with it. And this is the reason why I figured out people don't want to take a stand. They don't want to come under scrutiny. And you want to know why a lot of people don't want to come under scrutiny? Because they got skeletons in their closet. I found out why so many Christians want to fly under the radar. They got something to hide. Stay with me now. I know what I'm talking about. And I figured out why a lot of these preachers cover up for one another. They're blackmailing each other. I'm shocked. I've been shocked at how many preachers cover up for one another. This preacher over gets caught in adultery, and this guy over here, first thing he does, he either brings him on staff or he brings him to preach for him. You want to know why? Because that preacher's got dirt on him. You can mark it down. I've watched young people do it in the youth group. Well, if you go tell the preacher, I won't tell the preacher what you did last week. So guess what they're doing now? Blackmailing each other. And because they don't want any attention on them, they just keep their mouth shut and don't say anything. It happens every day. Happens all the time. That's why it pays to live right. Anybody got any leverage on you? No leverage. None. They have to lie about it or make it up or blow something out of proportion. You know what Daniel said? Daniel said, I know I'm sticking in the mud. That's okay if I'm under more scrutiny. It makes me more visible. The fact that they had a higher personal standard made them more visible. Look at verse 15. And at the end of the 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. There was a comparison and there was intense scrutiny. Most people won't stand up for what's right because it attracts too much attention. And they don't want any light on them. You know I'm telling the truth. Leaders operate like lightning rods. They naturally attract light and heat from others. They're most likely to be criticized when things go wrong, blamed if things don't get fixed, and honored if things go well. When a storm hits, they take the light and the heat for the team. Both the perks and the price of leadership is recognition. People look to you. The downside of this is criticism. No one pays much attention to the crowd. If you're leading others, you'll be criticized. People focus on the one up front. You know, sometimes in order to protect yourself, you have to put yourself at risk. Sometimes to protect your families, you have to put yourself at risk. I'm amazed, and I get hundreds of letters, and I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of letters, emails, phone calls, text messages from people that have read the book Wolves Among Lambs. And you would not believe the stories that I have to wade through. It'd make you sick to your stomach. God has had to give me an unusual grace and an unusual ability to literally forget the phone call the minute I hang up because I couldn't handle it if I thought about it much longer. My wife will tell you, some of the emails I show her, it'll tear you out of the frame what's going on in churches, independent Baptist churches, and nobody's saying a word. Nobody's saying a word. And I'm sitting back going, how is this happening? I'm going to tell you how it's happening. Nobody wants to say anything, and nobody wants to draw any attention to themselves. It's shocking. It's shocking. But see, they've been doing that since they were a kid. They did it in the youth group. Now they're married with kids. I mean, I get stories of parents whose kids are sexually assaulted in the church by the youth pastor, bus worker, Sunday school teacher, and they won't even leave the church over it. They keep going. We counseled a family last week that drove clear from halfway across America, drove all the way to our house for counseling. And they're telling their story, and I said, hang on just a second. You mean that was happening to your sister, and y'all kept going to that church? I can't get my head wrapped around that. Some of y'all looking at me like you don't believe me. I wouldn't believe me either if I wasn't getting all these letters and emails and phone calls of unbelievable stuff that's going on in our churches. I'm talking about being a stick in the mud with the children of your own sort. I ain't talking about the world. I'm talking about our own crowd. More visible, more scrutiny. When everybody else was bowing down to the golden image, the 3 Hebrew children stood out by standing up. Everybody else bowed down. They just stood there. But all of a sudden now, everybody saw them. Sometimes just taking a stand. Just taking a stand. And there's such a famine in this land for people that will take a stand. Some of you young people are so scared of your friends cutting you off. You have no idea that if you took a stand, you'd pick up a couple thousand new friends. Why do you think I got a stack of letters on my office table of people from all over America that stopped what they was doing and wrote letters and cards? Some of them putting checks in there for $100, $200, $300, $500, $700 and sent it to a church they'd never even been to before. They said it was so refreshing to see somebody take a stand. Nobody hardly standing anymore. I'm getting love offerings from Catholics. I'm getting love offerings from Jews. Said, I wish my rabbi would open our synagogue. I wish our priest would open our church. I sent him that email yesterday from Australia. They said our church is completely shut down over this thing. So glad to see somebody taking a stand. There's a vacuum. There's a void in this country of people that are willing to take the heat just for doing the right thing. Nobody wants to take the heat. Scared to death. He told us, and Jesus told us in Matthew 5:14, ye are the light of the world. The city that sit on a hill cannot be hid, neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. That means you're going to have to be different from everybody else, and you just got to let your light shine. I don't want to draw too much attention. That's what he's talking about. There's no telling how many people in Covington will get saved. There's no telling how many people in Covington will start coming to Canaan Baptist Church if every member of Canaan Baptist Church will let their light shine boldly and unapologetically. I told my wife, I've been talking to her. I'm catching heat right now from these people on social media. And I said, here's the problem with them. They don't know how I tick. They actually motivate me. The more they criticize me, the more it motivates me. They can't cancel me. This cancel culture, they can't cancel me because I ain't apologizing. I'm going to double down, say it louder 3 or 4 times in 2 or 3 languages to make sure they understand what I'm saying. I ain't backing down, and they're not used to that. They're used to going, boo, and most people are going, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. Are you kidding me? It is so refreshing when I read a newspaper article or a headline. I don't even know who it's about or what they did. But if it starts out with so-and-so refuses to apologize, I'm like, no, that's about time. About time for that. They refuse to apologize. I don't know what they did. They might have been wrong. I'm just glad to see somebody not apologize for a change. You know what I mean? I'm being silly. But the point I'm trying to make is God's people have such an inferiority complex. Preacher, we're outnumbered. We've always been outnumbered. We've never been in the majority. Why do you think he calls us a remnant? We've never been in the majority. Let me close with this point number 3. You'll be more vocal, you'll be more visible. But thirdly, a stick in the mud will be more valuable. Verse 19, there was none found like them. By the way, I can't help but notice Daniel made the decision in verse number 8 that he would not defile himself. He picked up 3 new buddies. They said, you know what? If Daniel's going to do it, I think I'm going to jump in there with him. It's amazing. Now, we know later Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they took a stand. But I think Daniel influenced them. Because the Bible says Daniel purposed in his heart. And the other 3 said, if Daniel can do it, I can do it. I'm going to tell you something. There was churches in the Philippines emailing me saying, well, man, if you're going to have church, we're going to have church. I'm like, whoa. I got the Constitution. You ain't. Hold on, boys. I got the First Amendment in this country. You don't have the First Amendment of our Bill of Rights in your country. You might better rethink this. No, if you're having church, we're having church. There were people having church in South America, Australia, Philippines after they saw that 3-minute clip on Laura Ingraham. I couldn't believe it. People all over the country said, well, if they can have church, we're going to have church. If they're going to move forward, we're going to move forward. I mean, I couldn't believe. We got a preacher we got a church in our city that runs over 2,000 people. I said, why don't we all just band together and all of us open on the 24th together? They can't arrest all of us. You know what he said? He's got over 2,000 members. He said, if you can get about 30 other churches on board, I'll jump on board with you. I said, there ain't 30 Bible preaching churches hardly in the state. Forget that. And I ain't being ugly, but I mean, that's where you're at. That's where we're at. You can get 25 or 30 other people. I'm not being ugly. I'm just preaching. Well, I mean, I'm ugly, but I can't help that. I was born this way. Look at verse 20. He found them 10 times better. Found them 10 times better. You know, when you're a stick in the mud, it makes you more valuable. Who was it in the very next chapter that not only interpreted the king's dream, but told him what the dream was? And by doing so, spared the life of every one of his friends and all the wise men. It was that stick in the mud, Daniel. Who was it that prayed to God in spite of King Darius' decree, survived a night in the den of lions and got the law changed? Guess who it was? Stick in the mud, Daniel. Who was it that so strongly influenced his friends to stand for God? In chapter 3, they defied the king's order to fall down and worship the golden image and survived the fiery furnace, and not one hair of their head was singed. Who was it that influenced them to do that? It was old stick in the mud, Daniel. Who was it in chapter 4 that interpreted the king's dream about the tree that filled the earth and was cut down, signifying the king would wander around in the fields like a wild animal for 7 years? It was old stick in the mud, Daniel. Who was it that interpreted the handwriting on the wall for Belshazzar, predicted the overthrowing of his kingdom? Stick in the mud. Every time it got real, they knew who to call, didn't they? Anytime it got, I'm talking about it got real. There wasn't no question about who they needed to bring in and talk to. It was Daniel. Who was it that was preferred above all other men and was made over the whole realm because of his excellent spirit? It was old stick in the mud, Daniel. You ought to notice how many times, sometimes you ought to sit and count how many superlatives are used in the first 6 chapters of Daniel to describe Daniel. What am I saying? I'm saying God can use people. And God will use people that are willing to be a stick in the mud. Now, Daniel didn't know none of that was going to happen. But he served 4 kings. He outlived 4 kings. He sat next to 4 kings, Brother Ingram. And you know where it started? Chapter 1. Principles that put him at odds with the children of his own sort. When most people said, I don't think I want to go down this road. Daniel said, I ain't worried about it. I'm not going to worry about it. I don't care what it costs me. This is what I can't do. This is what I'm not going to do. I got to say something. If it puts me under the microscope, so be it. But this is what I got to do. And it made him so valuable. God used him under 4 kings. Here's my appeal to you tonight, Canaan Baptist Church. I don't care if it's within your family, within your youth group. And I'm not trying to be divisive tonight. If that's what you're getting from this message, you're missing what I'm saying. But I know this, that many independent Baptists will look around and see what is going on in their church, and they will just settle in amongst and just average it out. Why don't you raise the bar in your life? Why don't you, Daddy, raise the bar in your family and in your home and let God use you maybe to bring the level up in this church? Why don't you have some principles? You say, well, nobody else believes that. What does the Bible say? What does God say? Well, I mean, I think I might be overdoing it. Really? You think there's anybody in here really overdoing it? When he said, be ye holy, for I'm holy. Huh? When he said, be the salt, how much salt's too much salt? How much light is too much light? As dark as it is, and as few lights as there are. I don't think you're going to overdo it. I ain't talking about being super spiritual either. I'm talking about being real. He had high standards and he had an excellent spirit. Now, that's a combination. Most people that I've met in my 47 years in the IFB that had standards had a stinking attitude to go with it. They walked around like they was God's gift to the world and their feet didn't stink. I ain't talking about that. I'm talking about having high standards, having high principles, be willing to pay the price no matter who don't like it and who it offends. Just do what you got to do to please God and let God use you to bring about unbelievable change in your church, in your family, and in your community. But you got to be willing to be a stick in the mud. Heads are bowed, eyes are closed.